Good morning, everyone. It's great to have everyone here. Simeon, great to see you this morning. I heard, Simeon, you're in Atlanta, so I heard you're swimming and maybe Noah's Ark's going to come through there.
Yes, it is definitely a torrential downpour right now.
Wow. We were on one yesterday, and on a call yesterday with the pink couch, and Robin had it too. So, well, welcome to all of our attendees. We're going to jump in this morning. Thank you for being a part of this. Simeon and I are really, really excited to be a part of this. Simeon and I have known each other, gosh, now Simeon, 6 or 7 years. If you can, I want to remind you on the registration page, if you haven't done it already, that there's a one-pager to download. So go out and download that. There's some sections for notes if you want to take notes on it, and you can get it afterwards. As well as we want to say hi to people on Facebook Live and YouTube this morning. So really exciting to have them along, and to our 50 or so guests with us this morning here. So just a couple of things as we jump in this morning. As a reminder, if you have any questions during today's event, please go to the Q&A session. I'll have those up, and we'll start looking and answering questions as we go through this chat this morning. And additionally, we'll also be monitoring the chat if you have anything. This webinar is being recorded, this Disruptor Connection. It will be up on the Disruptor Connection website hopefully tomorrow. So if you want to go back and look at it, great, you can have that available. Additionally, we are looking for new tools all the time and resources from you guys. So all about crowdsourcing tools, getting those tools. If today you have any tools that we don't talk about or that are like just awesome tools for you and they're free, pop those links into the chat so everyone can get it. We're going to get them all together. And again, when we talk about tools, we talk about that in a light term. Those can be TED Talks, podcasts, anything, games that you do. And if you don't drop it into the chat, you can always send it to info@disruptorleague.com. Additionally, Simeon and I will be doing some polling questions that we'll dig into. And if you're on Facebook or on YouTube, you can put comments in there. We have people monitoring them. I actually have Facebook Live up too. If I see a question, we'll try to get on those as well. So awesome to have you guys. Simeon, so glad to have you part of this session today. When Simeon and I first met each other, Simeon was a partner of ours at MOFI, and he was the head of disruption and innovation at Navicent Health System. And when he left there, he actually came and became our chief disruption officer and does a ton of stuff with us. But Simeon actually helped us bring to life a tool, and it's so funny. In the room that I'm sitting in today, and you may not be able to read it, and I kind of turn to you, it says, "I've learned so much from my mistakes. I'm thinking of making a few more." And this toolkit that we put together first and prototyped, some of you guys here have used the terminology that have worked around us, shitty first draft. Simeon walked through that with us, and it was awesome to walk through that. So Simeon, you know, when you and I first connected around building a toolkit for a health system, for a hospital system, what even drove you to want to do that within Navicent?
Yeah, great question. So I think that for us inside of a health system, it is very easy to just focus on break fix, the horizon one, continuous improvement, continuing to do the norm. And one of the things that we had the pleasure of talking about, you and I, we met a couple times and you said, hey, tell me more about what you're doing. And we talked, we had the opportunity to meet in Atlanta. And then the next call that we had, you said, hey, I respect what others have done in other industries around creating toolkits, but you and I know that it's different for healthcare. So I socialized it with starting with the CEO and the chief strategy officer and then others and said, how can we bring back that true north or that why to people's existence, which is they're in this for the people that actually need healing. The part that I think really needs to get highlighted here, Sean, is while that drove me to say, what can we do for healthcare to bring people back to their true north? Because, you know, shift after shift after shift, it's a grueling situation. And these are heroes. And sometimes when you have to fill out extra forms, you kind of lose sight of that. And the part that got me is you and I were meeting about it. And then you said, great, what are you doing next Tuesday? And I asked why. And you said, I'm going to be on a plane or on the road, and I am coming to see your health system. And I said, well, Sean, we don't have a contract together yet. And you said, okay, I don't think you understand. We start with empathy on this, and how are you going to actually have us to create something when I haven't even had empathy for the people that have walked through? And you came in, and I remember you closed the door, met with one of our head nurse researchers for 2 hours. You left, then you sponsored a lunch, then you stayed and you walked around the downtown there. You walked around the local university, you walked around the campus, and you said, okay, I now think we can start to build something because I've had empathy for local people. And I actually wanted to tell you, thank you for that. Way before we actually got into a deeper kit, you said, I need to have empathy for the situation. And not enough people take you up on that when you say, let me come down, see what's going on, and see if we have the right tools for you. So while I may have wanted to start, you kind of really pushed it forward.
Yeah, so Sibby, one of the questions we've got is, what was your own true north? Like, you know, they understand you were working with the team, but what drove you to get to this true north to do this?
Very simple. I really started to see the pendulum swing a little bit too much towards, and nothing against it with my background, a little bit too much towards Lean Six Sigma. I started to see too many people try to usher in something that I had seen at scale at a world's largest company, but they were for inanimate objects. And I was a little disappointed that we were feeling like we got to this panacea, that we were going to actually get one tool or one approach and start to optimize healthcare. That's great for behind the scenes, but I just really felt like the customer, the consumer, the health person deserved to be treated differently than a part that was going through a larger system. And, you know, I'm going to go a little bit further. What really got me is when I went into the emergency department, and it was a busy emergency department, great heroes there. But on one side, just because of the circumstances, you had a probably 13-year-old kid. And then on the other side of it, against the wall, you had a prisoner. And they were going through the same process. And I'm just putting myself back in that kid's shoes of all the questions I would have asked my parents. And, you know, I just really felt like we needed to get really recentered towards who are different types of customers. Why are we doing this? Of course, care should be for each and every person. I'm not saying that it should be different for a child versus a prisoner, but that really caused me to say, what do we need to do different? Because Six Sigma is not going to fix the experience that they're having. That should be a little bit different.
Yeah, so as you know, I call myself a recovering Six Sigma person, right? So I went through that process and could train on it, and then went through a couple other processes. And so when we were talking about this and prepping for this, Simeon, we talked about the keys to building your toolkit, and you just hit on number one. So find tools that point you towards empathy and creative thinking. And we are really, like, passionate about that. And now that you're even with us on our team, you can attest to this with our listeners today, that I will not, and we will not work with a partner if they're not willing to lead with empathy first. And we've got to learn. And even when we work with a really big retailer now, and we bring consumers in all the time, because it really helps us get to solving that big, hairy problem that happens. And then we talk about step 2, Simeon, and for everybody in here, we're going to talk through some steps, and then I actually have the toolkit sitting here in front of me, and we'll talk through kind of what happens and what we use with the toolkit. But when we move from step 1 of getting empathy and creative thinking, then we move to this whole step 2 piece where we identified that we test the tools in a safe space and adapt as necessary. And I really want to talk about the safe space that we created within your organization. And one of our mindsets is to go where the love is. And you actually found a couple doctors that were really passionate about this. Talk a little bit about how we created, again, this is what's really, I think, unusual about this situation is we launched this in a very traditional hospital system that measures quality metrics, that measures process, like you were saying with Six Sigma, and all those quality things, and was able to really bring a mind shift within the organization. So talk a little bit about that, testing the tools and how we actually created an amazing safe space. I remember many of those sessions.
Yeah, and I really don't, what I'll do, Sean, is just kind of take one step at a time, because I think that people can get number 2 if they really get number 1, right? So I really love how you said, let's start with the empathy. And again, you had came down, not a single, charge. You came down and spent time with us. And I remember asking you to come over and meet with several of our clinicians in a little class that we were doing. And what everybody else asked you, you had just came from an international trip. They said, why are you here? Why are you walking the streets? Why are you telling us about our wonderful food that we have? And you told this wonderful story about, you said, hey, wait a minute, I've walked in some of the best churches in rural Mississippi. I will walk through some of the greatest places in our country because I love people, and you do too. And that really sparked something in a few of our phlebotomists who are doing some, great draws on a regular basis. But as one of our phlebotomists said to you, it's got to be a better way to do this for kids, right? It's got to be a better way to get more empathy for the fact that no kid likes to have a needle, drawn for them. So when we were getting the safe place together, we said, why don't we do this in a place that has a great serene environment? So we did it in our Cancer Life Center. And I'm so grateful for that Cancer Life Center, because when you walk in there, you feel peace, you see tranquility, and you get the opportunity to open up some doors for some great heroes, but also some people who are going through some tough treatments. And we invited several doctors, but the ones who replied and actually came, they were magnificent. They were ahead of our family medicine residency. And at the end of it, we were going around day 1, and this wonderful gentleman, Dr. Harry Struthers, said in his Morgan Freeman voice, I think we should do this for all residents. And I mean, we were all just sitting there. We already had reverence for him, and other people did. But when he said that, it was just very eye-opening. Then that started to popcorn into a few other things. Where I want to go very quickly is to acknowledge that we not only went where the love is, we created that safe place, but we also allowed them to express themselves. And many people had come and they said, you know what, I have not left my department in 5 years. I'm in the business office, and you had us get out of the door within the first 5 minutes. And in that first 5 minutes, people were talking about what they knew about the consumer or the patients, and they had all the stats and this, that, and the other. And you kind of blew it up and you said, You mean the lady who we just passed, who we had to open a door with, who was opening the door for her husband, who's now driving her husband and she hasn't driven in 20 years? That's that. And then you sent people out and they came back and they had a different perspective because they hadn't left their office. They hadn't left their department. And people came back with the most innocent but yet difference-making things such as, wait a minute, our discharge lounge needs some opportunities to bring a little bit more love there because I was cold in there and other people, that's their last experience. The doctor saying that, someone who works with our seniors in music therapy noticed some things. So it gave us a fresh set of eyes because we had a safe environment, and then you sent us back out as if we didn't work there into different parts of that health system and said, Netflix can't do this, guys. You can't walk into the front door of Netflix even though you're a customer. I remember that like it was yesterday, Sean. And you said, but your customers walk through every day and you get the opportunity to know them more than a stat, more than an infographic. Go find out more about them and then come back in a safe place and let's talk about it. I thought that was remarkable.
Yeah, I remember that moment, Simeon, when we sent them out, and in the room we were in, it was on the second floor, and you could actually see most of the campus from that particular room in the corner of the hospital system. And I remember standing watching, and because one of the instructions we gave people is that they had to go observe, they couldn't talk, they couldn't ask people questions, they just could only observe. And I remember when that team the first time came back, like there were people in tears that went, I never looked at this in a different way. You know, because they had been locked in their office and or just busy. And I remember, you know, when he stood up and he gave that as like, we need to do this for all of family practice. It was like a hush. It was the reverence of the hush come over the room because people were like, oh my gosh, we're gonna do something culturally. We're gonna hit leadership. We're dealing with people. Those mindsets all just started to shift in such a dramatic way. Then we talk about this whole, you know, step 3 piece, and then we'll get into the toolkit some here, Simeon. But we talk about step 3 about building your toolkit is, you know, just go kick some ass with the tools and changing mindsets as you go. And so I remember we trained, you know, 2 cohorts within your organization. Then we kind of left, but you guys went and kicked ass. I mean, you did some major changes, and you had some great senior leadership buy-in. Can you share a little bit about that and what that was like? Because we went in, we trained, and we got out and let you guys just tweak it and make it your own.
Well, thank you for that as well, because you sparked it for us, and we needed that at that time. And, you know, while a lot of people focus on being innovators and disruptors and change agents, I'm thankful that we were able to open the door for change to exist. And so kudos goes to some of the great people who were part of those 2 groups. And they did go a lot further. And inside of those groups were not only clinicians, but also people in administration, key people in HR, key people in compliance. And what they did is absolutely remarkable because we gave them 45 days to get ready to present to the head of the physician group, to the head of the foundation, to one of the key leaders in finance as a quote unquote Shark Tank. And we said, you're not going to just observe this. You're not going to just enact these tools and come up with simple prototypes. How can you present this to an investment council? That's what we called our Shark Tank, and show them that we're starting with empathy. I'm happy to say that what was presented for our family health center. So if a lot of people don't know, federally qualified family health practices are critical to us taking care of primary care for those vulnerable populations. And that particular group led that charge, got the approval, started to retrain the residents and get them more connected to knowing the fact that while it says Gertrude Jones, she really likes to be called Miss Betty. And as a result of that, their patient satisfaction scores went up. We had an incredible leader, Keenan, who worked with patient satisfaction. Again, Dr. Harry Struthers, who did it. And when they went and asked for the money, they didn't ask for a lot of money, but it was amazing. I'm getting a little touch right now because one of the key members of Shark Tank, when they showed the video of what they were doing for the residents and the community there, started crying. And this is a senior executive in this organization. That's fine. But Sean, I think that they get the credit for some other things as well. Because they took that approach, because they got more in tune with what was needed, therefore their consumers, who other might say, hey, those are the Medicare folks, those are the low income folks. Those vulnerable populations were protected in this COVID crisis. So at the peak of it in April, their primary service area for that federally qualified practice had one of the lowest per capita of any in our state of Georgia, because they were proactive on treating them better, getting them familiar with some things, and actually taking a huge advantage. Now, is that the only, I'm not saying that correlation is creating causation. I'm saying that they started to create a snowball there. They got the funding there. And now nobody could have predicted what happened with COVID-19, but they were very, very in tune with the community and protected them in a very significant manner. So you never know where to start. I thank you for getting us, you never know where it's going to end. I thank you for getting us started. And I don't think you had actually heard that story of what some of the great people had accomplished, those heroes, getting jailed with the community right where Dr. Harry Struthers is, after he got up in his reverence way and said, we're going to do this for all residents.
Yeah, so here from Wim. In healthcare corporations, we are by compliance very restricted in talking directly to patients. This makes it difficult to ideate and quickly experiment with patients. Any ideas? So I can share some of mine and would love to hear yours. Simeon, you know, we work all the time with healthcare organizations, and very little do we ever do anything around where we need to see HIPAA information. It's just real human to human interactions. Like Simeon was just saying there, you know, it may say Gertrude somebody that wants to go by Miss Betty. Well, that's just a simple conversation we have doing ethnographic research with them that doesn't need us to dig into systems. And it's amazing, I think, and literally all of our partners and clients that we've worked with, we've never had to go through that HIPAA compliance training, because we make sure that we do it in a space that's very different. Like Simeon was saying, we were not even in the hospital when we were doing the testing, and the safe space for him. So I think, you know, for me, it's just finding a different way of doing it. And yeah, we're compliant, but I also, and there's some people on here that know and have heard me say this, I'm really over healthcare systems using HIPAA as an excuse. You know, well, HIPAA won't allow us to do it. And some people that I worked with when I worked for a big payer in the world will tell you, I used to call the head of government affairs and just say to her, is this really an issue? Like, are people, you know, is this just an excuse? And we've even seen it here in the COVID-19 stuff, right? Like all of a sudden, all those things that were barriers and restrictions are getting lifted, and look at the amount of great things that are happening. So Simeon, your answer to that, and then we'll dive into the toolkit here.
Yeah, you know, listen, it doesn't take, and so there's a difference between in healthcare, there's rounding that occurs, okay? And typically, I love rounding specifically when healthcare administrators and executives do it, because you're checking on your people, right? Seeing if they need anything. Those are folks who are, you know, they're on that second shift overnight or the weekend shift. And so I think that that shows a level of empathy. But I agree with you that there's no excuse not to sit silently and watch and observe your consumers. So the difference is that we weren't interviewing them for research to understand their favorite color of tea, what their food and diet was, what their condition was. We had actually had people go out and be a fly on the wall and watch what other people are doing and how they're experiencing the system that you are trying to optimize. And ask yourself, are you trying to optimize it for you in your quality metrics, lopsided? Are you also trying to balance that with optimizing it for those people who are actually in the physical pain, who are actually looking to enhance and elevate their health status? And so to wait for HIPAA to sit there in a discharge lounge and realize that the temperature is way too brittle for those who are coming out who have had infusions and other situations, you're not asking people about their medical condition or to share anything about their medical condition. You're observing the environment and getting that ethnographic research. I can go on and on about that, but I too would never jeopardize someone disclosing something that would be inappropriate, but we also cannot wait to understand how the front of the curtain could be optimized just as well as the back of the curtain while we're waiting for HIPAA compliance. Because quite frankly, I think you also jade the conversation once you know about their condition. What about their human condition that they're experiencing with the system?
Love what you said. Yeah, got it. Love what you said there, everything. Great stuff. So we keep talking about this toolkit. And so I want to show the listeners who haven't seen it, we created something called the Yes Kit. And it is completely in different format than it was, Simeon, when launched it with you. And for the listeners, it's based, I went to Stanford D School, so it's based in human-centered design. It's based in that theory, but it also took human-centered design, some of what we do in Six Sigma, some in something called innovation engineering. And we put together a kit. And I will tell you, for those of you that are on here, if you don't have it, you can download it actually on our MOFI website, and I'll tell you where to find that. But one of the things I always found frustrating, Simeon, around human-centered design, I'm a huge practitioner of it. One of the things that I struggled with is that it never taught you how to implement. It taught you how to ideate and get to an idea and prototype. But you talked about something where we created the Shark Tank and people had to go pitch. So in the Yes Kit, for those of you that download, the very opening card, there's 6 steps in our toolkit that we use. It's empathize. Simeon and I have been talking a ton about that. And if you know human-centered design, you'll know most of this. Define, which is really the how might we portion and how do you make sure you're solving for the right problem. The third is ideate. The fourth is prototype. The fifth is test. But the 6th piece is really powerful, and we've seen this. We call it pitch and go. And we actually took from mine and Simeon's experience with startups and created a pitch deck that most startups would use when they go for investors to invest. So this is really clear. It's pitch and go. There's 6 cards for each of it. Each of the steps has its own cards. There's some on here. I see Marcy's on here from Kimberly Clark. She took this and she has created her own little Disruptor League within. But I think the powerful piece about this, right, Simeon, is you can go download this. You can get it. People on here, we can download. But it was literally the ability, you and I talked about it, that these kits were sitting in, the old kits used to be orange boxes. And they were sitting on people's desks. So you would walk by and you would see those. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And so what else was in the Yes Kit is your standard dollar kitchen timer. Everybody needs a kitchen timer. We created this deck called the Disruption Deck. which is 14 or 15 exercises that if you get stuck, Michael Harper on our team really helped us dive into this. And we talk about if you spend 15 minutes and you're stuck and you can't move on, grab your disruption deck, grab one of these. So like take one of the cards. This one is called Promise, Don't Sell. It walks you through how to do this exercise. Then there's this, again, going back to the first stage, empathy. We have the empathy workout, which are 14. And I remember a moment, Simeon, in one of your classes, because one of the empathy workouts is around looking, eye gazing. So eye gazing, it says stare into someone's eyes for 3 minutes and you can't talk. And I remember when we finished that moment with your team in the first class, that there were 2 or 3 people that were really emotional because they realized the power of that empathy. And then, of course, we put in this great little notebook. I still love this notebook because it's already got the Post-its built in with your Simeon. And then if you work in our space at all, Sharpies. You got to have a Sharpie. So that is all that's in a yes kit. And we tweak. So some, like in Simeon's situation, what we did, I remember, Simeon, you wanted people to get out of the building. So we went and bought coffee gift cards to the local coffee shop in town, right? And then we threw those in there. And so that was powerful because then everyone, and I think we also threw a chocolate bar in yours too. So people had some sweets, they could go get coffee, they had the kit. And so Simeon, we've got some poll questions, and I actually want to dive into this question to hear from the group here around which step in the design process do you need more tools and resources for? And so we're going to launch that. We just talked through these 6 steps around empathy, define, ideation, prototype, test, and pitch and go. And so to the group here, what are you seeking more resources around? Because one of the things that's in the Disruptor League we're trying to do is to grab those resources. And Mark, I saw you just asking why we're getting the polls together here on where's the kit. If you go to mofi.co, so mofi.co, and go to the tab under resources, you'll see Yes Kit. You can download the downloadable version, and the downloadable version is the 6 cards. You can download the empathy workout, and you can download the disruption deck. And so we've got them all available. They're actually newly updated as of this morning. The team even surprised me with some new updates. So they are there. Go download it, and then you can reach out, Mark, to any of our team. I'll give you an email to reach out to us to talk about. But so again, we just asked the question. Let's see the answers on which step in the design process do you need more tools and resources for? Pitch and go doesn't surprise me. Does it to you, Simeon?
Not at all.
Which is why we were so passionate about that. And I think that even comes back to, Steve's asked some questions around, what would, this one question, and I could probably answer it for you, Simeon. What would Simeon do differently to speed this process up? Because hospitals are notorious for not changing. I think you would agree to me that we would dig in even more to the pitch and go process and prep the team more for that, right?
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that.
And there's thanks to some of the people on here, they've already gone out there and put the link in where you can download it. What I will tell you with this, right, Simeon, is what we learned is some of the tools that we've heard people talking about here. We use the value proposition canvas and the business model canvas to help people with this. because most of you may not know this in here, I'm a finance person by trade. But was one of my careers. So we don't do innovation for innovation's sake. So, Simi, talk about even, what would you do differently even in this space around the pitch and go process?
That's probably something, I'm glad that a lot of people responded that way, but that's probably something that we would do a little bit different. We probably would have had more executives there beyond the investment council or Shark Tank. Simply because, again, we had a wonderful head of our foundation there. We had the head of our physician group there. And we actually had someone who was our leader in finance. And I've done a fair share of presentations, Sean, in my lifetime, and had to get those PowerPoints ready. But to see those individuals melt and just simply say, how much do you need? And are you sure that's all you need to make that type of impact? We should have had more executives there to see that. And we should have had another program, can really get a little bit further on how do we actually create a tribe around those executives so that they can actually spread the good news about what this team was doing as well. So we could have had a campaign, because the heroes in that situation were those brave people in both of those cohorts who pitched, and some of them had never even met, beyond seeing these leaders on an org chart, they had never even met the head of the foundation, who was at that time going through a multi-million-dollar capital raise for a new children's hospital. And her response was, bring more of this to me. The person, and I remember like it was yesterday, the person in finance response was, this is why we work in healthcare, folks. So the pitch and go is definitely essential. As I just indicated, the finances will follow, and the business case was included in that. But most importantly, started with the true north of, these are our consumers, these are not statistics, these are not vulnerable populations, these are our fellow citizens, our neighbors. And what does it mean if we can actually increase health for the least of these? How much more can we save? And I'll tell you the other part of this, Sean, that I really enjoyed is the parts where we couldn't figure out the math or the finance in the pitch and go. Because we had actually hit on the mindset, that particular finance leader said, wait a minute, I know how to finish this business case for you guys. And that was really critical. And he told us what buckets of money this was actually going to be appropriated to, how do we classify it, and then how do you actually get the data to support it? Because of the fact that we were all aligned to the same true north. So the pitch and go it's really powerful.
Yeah, I just can't talk more about it. And I love, I appreciate Marcy's on here. She talks about a talented product developer does not need to have lots of tools. They need to know the questions to ask.
Right.
It's a lot of consumer interaction. We keep talking about co-creation, radical collaboration. And they just need truly how to figure out the right problem. And one of the things we really use this for is it's just simple. And I love Marcy actually put on here that she's excited to see this new version because this one was so simple, clear, and idiot proof. And when we were creating this, and you remember the first prototype we did of this, Michael on our team was sitting back in the back taking just copious notes, trying to get it together. And I kept saying, we have to make it for a kindergartner. We have to make it for a kindergartner. And I think we are pretty spot on with doing that. One of the questions on here, and this is a great question, and I can talk a little bit around this, is how has this type of methodology helped organizations during COVID-19? We actually used this whole process to do some great work with Walmart, our retail client. And we, I don't know, we've probably walked 200 people at Walmart through this. And it's back to the huge mind shift that's happened in Simeon Love is still consumers first, patients first, consumers first, whoever it is, members first. If we stay in that true north constantly, even when you have people that are scared of diverging and creativity, if you just keep talking, this is for our consumer, this is for our patients, this is for whoever it is. And even with right now, this whole toolkit is made for COVID-19. We didn't know it when we lived in, but it is COVID-19, right? Like every time we are walking through problems right now, we're working with the new partner, we go back to this. And I don't necessarily go grab the kit because it's so ingrained in me, but start with empathy first. I just had a call this week where some budgets are being cut and they're like, oh, we don't need to talk to the consumers. And I just stopped and I said, no, let's figure out where we can cut budget someplace else. And we got to keep the consumers. So Victor asks here, how do the tools help in customer relationship management in the contemporary situation? Simeon, I'll let you dive into that with me, but when I think about customer relationship management, this is customer relationship management. We work with call centers with this, with consumers, because it's all about that. Simeon, any reflections on that? On how does this help in customer relationship management in this contemporary situation?
I just saw a comment from someone who was participating and helped lead some things, Isabel Knight, and she recommended a few tools, but she reminded me, as had the opportunity to travel all over. Okay, that's great. I understand what maybe the Mayo Clinic has come out with or Cleveland Clinic has come out with, but those are stats again. And what does that mean, when you leave consumer electronics shows and you're seeing the nice, new, shiny and buzzy, but what does that mean for the actual consumer that's right in front of you? And if you cannot connect it to that, it is a nice and shiny object. So how do you keep a consumer first in the middle of all this? I'll tell you, health systems, and maybe many of you are inundated with, I know somebody who has a mask, I know somebody who has PPE, I know somebody who has all of this. Well, staying and keeping the consumer first, in this case, I'm sure, Sean, you feel the same way, is also saying, okay, well, wait a minute, we've treated, at this point in this country, over 1 million cases, but what are we doing to make sure there's no rebound? How are we following them home? Because that is the other part of empathy and ethnography as well. How are we following them home to actually make sure that social determinants of health don't make sure that there's a boomerang and they're right back in here in a short period of time, or as many people looking at that second wave? So keeping the consumer first is not transactional. It is customer relationship management all the way through. It is going beyond that point of service and actually thinking, what else does this person need beyond just this point in time? And once that happens, I'll tell you, you start to make a huge difference.
Yeah, and I'm going to be really aware of time here. We're right at the closing. And Mark, I just saw your last point. You can reach out to me at Shawn, SHAWN, at mofi.co. We've seen a lot of, sorry for your situation where you were let go from that organization because they didn't want to change. Listen, we have kind of a motto: you either disrupt or be disrupted. And that's what's happening. The whole world. I'm sitting in a little staycation right now with my wife in a city that is completely, I've never seen it like that before. We came to visit with one of our clients in Las Vegas, and it's mind-blowing to me and sad to me how a city is disrupted, not just an industry, but a city has been disrupted in such an amazing way. Like, I don't know how it rebounds. Much like New York City, I saw Allison on here. who's sitting in Manhattan. You know, what I will say to close again, when you close out today, there will be a survey. If you can take time to answer 3 quick questions for us so we can keep improving these. Also, really, really excited too. Simeon, thank you for being here. 2 weeks from today, we're going to have Robin Beers, the Senior Vice President of Product Design and Insight Leader from Wells Fargo. And we're actually going to talk and take on what's happening in America right now with all of the racial riots and stuff. And it's called Healing the Divide, Designing for a Just World, and how you use design and these things that we're talking about to redefine what the world looks forward. That link is available already on the Disruptor League under Disruptor Connection. So would love to have you guys back for that. And just be on the lookout for some new exciting things where we're going to be taking these tools and this fall launching a program and a school in a lab where we're going to be looking for disruptors like all of you to join in because one of the big things, and we didn't get to talk a ton about this, Simeon, is the radical collaboration and radical relationship piece. And we want to go blow up healthcare with the way what's going on today with other industries. And so the Disruptor League and Disruptor Connection and our new Disruptor Studio that's going to launch is going to take that on. So we thank everybody for being a part of this. Simeon, thank you. Thank you for being on this journey. What we started 4 or 5 years ago, and today we have this because you stepped out, your leader stepped out and did this with us. So thank you guys so much. Don't forget to fill the survey out and register for the next one. And thank you everybody for being a part of this. Stay safe and be well.